today. Jason, take it away.
There, and then sort of take the first sort of check-in and sort of, I guess, hear from you, either, I guess, put it into the chat, or if you want to unmute your microphone and put it forward. But where are you in your journey, and what are the issues that you're facing today? It'd be great to just sort of hear from, one or two, important things that are on your mind today. Don't be shy.
Jason, I'll start everybody off. So for us, this is very timely because we're about to try and test the water with some products that we've been working on for a number of years and testing the usability of those product components in different markets. But now we're ready to try and do the product market fit. And we're going to do that through partners. And part of what we're trying to do is help the partners explore those price models in different markets as a sort of B2B setup. So we're trying to figure out, how do we prompt people to get the right answer on the price, as well as being involved in trying to do that ourselves as well. So
no, thanks Simon, and we'll cover off some of the pricing models.
Sure.
Anyone else want to volunteer?
So we are looking to launch a replacement for fertilizer, targeted initially on rice, which gets you to Asia. And it's a highly fragmented market, albeit distribution in some countries is much more concentrated, but the end user market is highly fragmented. And so that poses a whole raft of challenges about actually getting the product out there, changing farmer behavior. I mean, you made the point, Jason, I can't remember how you put it, but they've been doing it one way for ages and it kind of works, even if it's expensive and bad for them. The behavioral change is very small, but it's different to what they did before to use a different product. And one interesting part of that is your first sort of trials, that if you go to a farmer in the UK or America and say, we can save you 50% of your fertilizer costs, they're like, whoa, no brainer. You can have 2 or 3 hectares. If your average small holding in Asia is 1 hectare, it's a massively high risk to ask them to trial it for them. So then we thought about, well, we could underwrite it, either insure it or self-insure it. And then you get into an interesting bit of financial modeling about to what degree can we realistically self-insure that? What's the cost of our customer acquisition then? And so, I'm getting into a little bit of detail, but it's the idea of entering this highly fragmented market with a level of centralized distribution and asking end users to change behavior on something that actually would be perceived to carry some risk by them.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and we'll cover some of those issues in this, Justin. What? Well, thank you for piping up. It's appreciated. It's good to hear, and I'm not the only one that's talking tonight. So terrific, thank you. So let's move on then, and let's sort of start talking about this and going global and the internationalization of your business. And for many of you, you'll have different reasons for wanting to do this, and it'd be good to explore some of those reasons perhaps later. But I guess the thing is, are you doing it because it aligns with your core business and what you're trying to do? Are you accessing new markets? Is it to achieve revenue growth because you can't get any further, or that the market that you're currently in is too small? Is it to reduce the cost of production? A different regulatory environment? And I think some of the food tech businesses, Singapore is quite attractive because it's recently changed its laws around lab-grown food, and so it allows you to do that. In other territories it is not possible. Or are you trying to prove to your VC that it's an investable business and there's some global scalability? These are just some examples about why you're doing it. But I think for your own benefit and thinking about this is to have some very clear reasons about why you're doing it, because that will help frame what success looks like for you on the other side of this. So in terms of doing this and going into a new market and say going from the UK to Asia, Australia to Brazil, timing is everything in doing this. And it's the things that I've seen that make it very important to assess and be able to ensure success is sometimes understanding the political, the economic, social, and technology, legal, environmental factors that are going on in that particular country. And I spoke about Singapore before, given that the legal frameworks allowed lab-grown food to be consumed there is important. And whereas in next door neighbor, say Malaysia, it may not be possible, but also the pricing and the willingness to pay for something may be very different as well. And so understanding those local and social factors are important in doing this. And so this is an important exercise to go through and understand what are you asking them to do, and is there anything that you're asking them to change. And so you talked about behavior, which is an important one. There is supporting infrastructure is available, and this is a good example. When at Adjacense we wanted to expand our business internationally, and what it meant was that we needed to then build local relationships with telecom providers to be able to ensure that we could get ground coverage to our neck bands. And so that is just one example of it's that supporting infrastructure that you may need to be successful with your product, or it could be manufacturing, it could be also access the skills and the right people. And what's the competition's capability? When going into these new markets, you're particularly in Asia, you're dealing with a lot of different countries that are together. However, the infrastructure between them are quite different, and the success of the competition in each of those markets is different. And so understanding where they sit is important to ensure your own success. And then what's your long-term goal? Why are you really wanting to do this internationalization? Is it to get it to your business to a certain valuation so that it can be acquired or sold, or are you building this for a long-term sustainable business such that to reap dividends for your shareholders? And so what is it that you're trying to do? And one, you've got to think through what those things are, because those decisions will come through in terms of the distribution that you're looking at. The other, in terms of this internationalization, is the willingness to pay. And this is just I guess it's not a great example, but it illustrates the point, which is there are different purchasing dynamics and local economic conditions to consider. And so what you might be willing to pay in the UK is quite different to what someone may be willing to pay in Asia. And in terms of what their farm cost structure is, and we see that perhaps in Australia as well, in terms of what farmers are willing to pay. And it comes down to also where the market conditions are. So if you're dealing with a commodity type of product, this means that are they price takers? Are they price setters? How are they able to ensure that there's full contracts within that? And so for the same product, you can have very different prices, but the actual product itself changes with respect to that price. And so this is something to consider for your own product or service, that to achieve traction, you may need to change the pricing structure, which means that the market segment is also different, which means that the product needs to change to go with that. So it's a smaller Big Mac rather than a larger Big Mac to achieve the traction that you require in your particular market. The other is the timing, too early or too late, right? And so leaving it too late is obvious. and you have competitors that are able to establish themselves on home ground advantage, but is your technology, product, and marketing and the way you think about that, is that optimized for your own home market? And does it need to change for the local market? How does it need to adapt to be able to be successful in that market? So thinking that one product will be successful in another market and being able to be translated doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be successful. And are you still, and I guess what Simon and Justin, you were talking about was, if you're still refining your product and not quite sure, you haven't quite nailed down your value proposition, but you're asking farmers to trust you and to trial this, and you're not too sure about what the outcome is, then that doesn't necessarily always work as well. And as you say, these farmers have small plots of land. They are a business. And so working with them means that you're asking them to take a risk. And so the more that you can reduce the risk and do that in collaboration with them allows you to be more successful. And so it's understanding and managing those expectations up front. And the other is just, with your own capital and being mindful of that, is avoid creating a mess in several countries. And so having lots of trials running across the globe to sort of try and meet some arbitrary investor milestone, which is just creating a mess of this, but it's showing that there is adoption across the world, but it's not necessarily demonstrating any value. So if you're able to demonstrate and show it works in where you are today, and then working closely and understanding what the value proposition and doing that in a stepwise approach is a good way of thinking about it and achieving some success. The other is what does it cost? And there's always unforeseen costs when going into international markets. And are you expanding into a bigger market with a better funded competitor? And so coming back to what I was talking about before is understanding that competitive landscape and who is it that you're competing against, and do they have a sustainable advantage, and do you have a sustainable advantage as well in that particular market? And given that there is always a substitution for your product, and the choice of doing nothing is always an option, is the value needs to be there. And so having a very clear unit economics for that particular competitive advantage is critical. Success also requires that investment in marketing and sales. And so how are you going to do that? And you might do that with a distributor, alliance, affiliate organization, or you might be wanting to do that yourself. And putting people on the ground doesn't necessarily always translate into success, because the incentives may not be right. And so having the right incentives for those people on the ground and the line, and if they're operating by themselves, or there may be one or two, and without someone from your own business, it can also create some tension, but also it needs to be correctly managed and worked with the local partner. And we'll talk about some of these relationships as well. So what sometimes happens in this internationalization is that you sort of hire a sales marketing manager to start trying to push sales in a particular market, but it doesn't always necessarily work, because one, the product may not be fully complete, the unique selling proposition may not be there, and there is still certain risk or no clear competitive advantage with that. And so to be successful requires to have a very clear value proposition for your product or service, whatever it may be that you're selling, and one or more of the founders to move into that market for some period of time. This means because people want to meet the founder, people want to understand more about the product, where it come from, and also whether they can trust the company as well. And with a clear focus on that market, and you need to then have the right budget to succeed. And so doing it in a underfunded way, or in a way in which is not commensurate with what the goal is that you're trying to achieve, invariably ends with no success at all. And so I'll come back to talking about what that looks like and how you can be successful. The other is some things for you to consider is you might be thinking about, well, I've got this market at home. This is the segment that I'm going after. It might be, it could be the rice market, pardon me, for example. And it could be for a particular group, but it may not necessarily be where you might be successful in the other markets. And so looking for adjacent small markets is another way of thinking about how you might be successful in that particular market or in that particular country, where you can demonstrate the competitive advantage and your value proposition, and being able to see how that translates. They may not translate always into success, but they're always worth looking at in terms of the ease of use and the way you might be able to win in that particular market. Large markets, should be considered and resourced, but they also come with the challenges of usually dominated by large competitors. So my view, and I'll give an example about this, is that smaller markets can be a good choice because you can maintain higher margins, there's less competition, and you can establish yourself in a niche in that particular market first, and then be able to do that really well. And that comes down to the focus of the business itself. Now, many of you looking to expand into Asia will be looking for perhaps a distribution and partnership model. And partnerships can be effective if done right. And I think the trap here for Western and perhaps European is thinking that you can get an agreement, have it signed, walk away, and it will be done. And that is not how things work, particularly in Asia, and takes time to build a relationship. And so it's very important for you to invest in that relationship. My own experience is that, there's endless dinners and lunches and all sorts of things where people need to understand you. They need to trust you. They need to know who your family is, where you've come from. They want to show you about their own lives. They want to show you the business. There's this amount of time. And that can take 6 months, but it's also a time when the commercial or business terms are not necessarily always discussed initially over a meal, and they can be at different times of the day. The importance, I think, around that is the investment in the relationship. And while there is an agreement, and invariably an agreement is in place, the way in which the agreement will be managed is through the partnership. And what is agreed verbally will be the way in which that is executed and run. And so investing in that time is important. Some sort of guidelines around this is that I would avoid exclusive relationships, particularly as your first one. This is, you're making decisions about your business and thinking about how you will walk back that agreement if you had to is also an important consideration. How do you get out of it if you need to terminate that agreement? So avoid the exclusive relationships, but also talk about what your expectations are around that. Underperformance of that partner can lead to less revenue, and so putting your hands in place of a distributor can be a way to be successful, but you're also outsourcing your success in some ways, and you're relying on them to be successful as well. The distributors for agricultural products in Asia, as Simon and Justin, you pointed out, is very fragmented, and trying to get that critical mass around that is sometimes difficult. So looking at adjacent markets where you've got other distributors that may not be directly in that particular field, but they have the size to be able to reach into that market maybe another way of thinking about it, and not necessarily going for what you think is sort of naturally the distributor that you require. The other is the product messaging and asking your partner to be able to shape that. And is your product ready to go? Distributors like to sell stuff, and if your product isn't ready to go, then it's too early to be having that discussion or being able to supply that to them. And is your partner sized appropriately for your product, right? So, and how does it compare to the other products and margins that they've got in their own list as well? So, if your product, if you're the company that you're asking is to sell your product, is a small company and doesn't have the reach, then it's not necessarily going to be successful. So taking your time to do that due diligence is an important step in all of this. Unfortunately, the failure rate of these alliances is quite high, 60-70% of them. And you know, after a deal is done, people then find out that the deal isn't fair, or it's not going to work. And so the odds are against you in some ways in which to make this successful. And so let's just talk a bit about how do you make this or increase your chances of making these things successful. In some ways, being a startup, you're invariably going to bump into Goliaths. You're going to bump into large companies that have enormous reach, enormous sales and marketing capacity, and will place demands on you. But you have an opportunity to be able to level the playing field, because what they see in you is an ability to increase their revenue, increase sales, and potentially want exclusive relationships with you, because they see that this is an opportunity that they can sell across all of Asia, not just in that particular country. So there's these sort of 5 things that I think that are really important in thinking about and working with your partner, whether that's a distributor, a reseller, a manufacturer in Asia, is while having a business plan is important, focusing on how you'll work together and building that trust is important in the early stages as well, because you'll develop the relationships and they'll want to deal just with you, and then you'll be able to introduce other people into the relationship, into the partnership, and then they'll become more comfortable. Also, don't also sort of focus just on the financial performance or the financial metrics of the relationship, that you need a certain amount of sales by a certain amount of time. Also, think about the things that you want to do to develop the relationship over time, and how will that look like? So is it, you know, the number of meetings that you have? Is it the number of issues that you're resolving? Is it, you know, the number of times that you've, you know, that things have had to be resolved at a higher level? Think about the things that you want to do in terms of that particular relationship, because this hopefully is a long-term relationship and will be successful for you. So investing in understanding a bit more about what that looks like over time is important as well. During, you know, discussions and negotiations of agreements, differences can always appear as if it's an area of conflict, but instead of thinking about that, think about those areas to leverage the value, and spend some time understanding what that is, because at the heart of this and the heart of conflict between this is a trust and relationship issue that needs to be there, and that comes through spending time and demonstrating that trust, and asking them to demonstrate that trust, and doing things and following up. And I guess sort of a sidebar on that is the communication platforms that you might have to use to be able to do that, and be open to doing that, to allow the relationship to flourish. But when you have those differences, think about how you want to resolve them and how you might, what you ultimately want to get. Because if the business is right, then you're going to have a lot of difficult conversations along the way, is how you might actually go about doing that. The other one is particularly around sort of JVs that you might have, is the governance structure of the organisation that you might have in place, is to ensure that there is ways in which that behaviour is collaborative and how you might work together in that. And then the other is, while you're spending a lot of time working on those relationships, there's also the internal relationships of your own business that you might need to do, because it could be a source of mistrust. There could be things there could be delays in delivery from your partner, or delays in delivery from you, that may lead to people within your own organisation sort of starting to mistrust the partner that you've selected. And so working internally with your own people to manage that relationship is also equally as important as doing it externally. Right. When working with you've identified a partner, and you might be trying to explore ways in which to work together, or what that might look like, is understanding what the value add to your partner is, and what risk are you really asking them to take. Because you're a small company, you've got a new product, new service, and you're asking them to do something. So this is a good sort of framework of thinking about, what level of risk are you asking them to take, and then when you identified sort of what the risk is, think about the things that happen internally to their business that they need to manage in terms of the risk, and so that you can then propose, or to have ways of which being able to convey and neutralize some of these risks that they may raise with you. So if you're going into an existing market and a new product, and it's a product development of an existing product, it might be an evolution, it could be an add to that sort of product, but the risks are low, and that's probably the best place to be. But you might be asking them to go into a new area or a new product, into a new market that doesn't exist. So it could be a health sensing technology that's being introduced to turkeys, and that's never been done before, and you're asking this particular partner to help distribute that product. And so you're asking them to diversify on their current product offerings. And so there is high risk there for them. And so you need to think internally about, how do I incentivize that risk taking? What's the impact to their supply chain? How do I manage that? How do I work with that? And being able to anticipate some of these things enables you to be able to overcome those objections that you may get from the partner and internal stakeholders. The other is the CapEx that may be required, setting up a new line, setting up new manufacturing, the internal production people, and getting internal buy-in. And are you, pardon me, eroding the current products that they're already selling? So these are always important considerations to think about, where and what you might be asking these partners to do. Sorry, I'm just recovering from a cold, and my throat is giving up on me, I think. So, all right.
Would it help if we did a 5-minute break?
I'm okay to keep going if you like. I'll just
Sure, yeah. No worries.
But I might just sort of stop there, perhaps, Aranav, and is there any sort of questions or feedback? There's quite a bit of material that we sort of covered there already, and happy to sort of touch on that if you like.
Yeah, one comment or feedback here. I think a lot of this really resonated with me and my experience, that growers are very risk aware. They know their margins. They know any new thing will impose a risk to their business, because that is their livelihood. And we need to make sure that any new processes or products introduced in a way that they can accept the associated risks. And so I think that's a very, very key point that we found in many cases. And one thing that we struggle with right now, we actually have a very engaged, very interested partner in country, which is very, very helpful to us. But in some ways, we need to manage expectations of timeframes. In the UK and in Europe, we are used to saying, oh, we can deploy this product, and that means we can do that in 3-4 months time, or maybe 6 months. There, they take us to the farm next day. Like, okay, here's the seed farm, we can do it now. So yeah, that was a surprise and something we need to manage, and any advice in kind of that is very welcome on how we can manage the expectations of timelines.
Yeah, I think if you're still in a development phase and there's sort of an iteration that needs to happen, and putting it onto the farm, testing it, and then getting it back, I think in terms of timeframes, instead of sort of saying, look, we're going to be working on this, and then in the next 12 months, you can sort of talk about like the milestone that we want to achieve is, this is what it looks like. And so this is what we need to achieve before we can come and do this with you. And then once we've done that, then we can. But then you just say, look, we'll send you a sort of an email every month or 2 months, whatever the right cadence is, just to sort of give you an update on the progress. So sort of put the focus on the milestone rather than the time frame is a way in which to do that. So you can say, look, this is the performance we're wanting to get to, and we're 60% of the way. And then it gives them some sense of, okay, you're getting closer, and this is what it looks like. But you can say, before we come, we really need to make sure that we've got it operating at this level.
Can I just offer a thought on that? Because we often deal with the challenge of people wanting stuff yesterday and we're not ready.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have learned is very effective is have 4, 5, 6 different tasks that you need to get that information back, and you can drip feed them those tasks, because invariably they will take time to deliver it, and so you give yourself breathing space then. As well as, you flip it over. If you're not the one running after it, it's somebody else running a bit as well.
Yeah, and give them sort of some homework to do, and collect some information, and there might be some setup things that you need to get, Simon, from them to help install the product. So yeah, it's a good point. Okay, I think my throat's recovered a little bit, so let's get going. So one of the things that I think maybe some of you might be looking at is to licensing, right? And as an approach for being successful in Asia. And so there's 2 things here that you sort of want to have thought out about what it is as sort of preconditions before you sort of go down this path. So you've either got a product that you've got some traction already and it's starting to grow, and so you've validated the business model. So you've shown that it works and there is value, and someone places value on what you're doing. Or you've got there's an existing customer market segment where someone else's revenues, including your own, of course, can be enhanced by integrating your technology into someone else's product. And so these are sort of typically the 2 types that you can see. So the example of the second one might be, say, a foodstuff or a food product that would be manufactured under license, that would be then part of you know, a larger product, whether that might be a meal or it could be a hardware component as well. Or the first one might be, well, you were able to do that, but to replicate your bottle. So, for example, in the example was the Zespri Kiwi, and they got to a certain point where there's only so much land in New Zealand that they couldn't expand their sales anymore because there was no more land to grow kiwis, and so they licensed that product into other markets to make that product. And so these are sort of the two sort of examples of doing that. But so let's sort of think about those things, and licensing is a good way, but it is also, my personal view is licensing can be a good way of achieving revenue for your business, but it's also sort of a low risk, low return thing as well, right? You're asking someone else to invest, and so there's price put on that and those sort of things, but it is very much a valid way of getting return on your investment, but also being able to generate revenues. And so there's several considerations to think about when it comes to this, and I'll sort of map this out. But non-exclusive demonstrates value in several negotiations. And so if you're not just going into one territory, but multiple territories and keeping it non-exclusive, then it means that you've got more control over that arrangement. And what it means is people also want you more than you need them. And so it allows you to sort of be able to control the conversation and the negotiation. If for whatever reason you want to have an exclusive relationship because there might be some commercial sense to do so, or there might be only one company that can do that, think about upfront payments as well, because exclusivity means that you're giving up territories, you're giving up things. And so there has to be a commensurate payment that is upfront to show that you're the value of the product or service that you've created. It's also good to benchmark the royalties. Have a look at what was normal in your particular industry or for your particular product, and there'll be benchmarks for that. You can get advice about that, but royalties is, you know, the way in which licenses work normally, and that can be sort of 5 to 6 to 7% as a very high number. Some products and some markets it can be different, of course, but that's sort of typical of where things sort of lay. And there's also times for that, in ensuring that there is what term and the territories. So someone might want Singapore, but they'll also say, look, we want to have Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. And so you can say to them, look, demonstrate success in Singapore, and then we'll give you first right of refusal to go into those other territories if you meet certain milestones. And so just think carefully about what you're giving up and what you're agreeing to during those negotiations. The other is the term of the renewal. So you don't want an indefinite license agreement. You want it to be able to come to an end so that you can, as a business, reassess the landscape and look at other businesses that may offer you better terms or be able to reach more customers on your behalf. And so having a term and a renewal period is important. Milestones, you want to have some milestones in terms of what they need to achieve. And you may need to have, they may want product development milestones from you as well. And so one example of that is that if you're developing a biological for farming, that may require to evolve that product and deliver a product over time. And then the support, how are you going to support that partner? And if they're selling the product, they may need support technically. And what's the sales and marketing structure look like? So just a few words just about exclusivity and upfront payments, because I think I see too often people just licensing their technology and exclusively are not asking for an upfront, and which really undervalues your business, and it's really a shitty deal for you. So don't be afraid to get some advice about this, and also talk to some people about that, and be able and think about how you might size that upfront payment. So to think about it, and how do you calculate it is, what sales are you giving up, right? Because of the exclusive license. So you think about, well, in Sri Lanka, there's a total addressable market of $1 million. At $100, it's 100 million, right? So what's reasonable then to you're giving up all of those yearly sales, and so you can think about that. How much you'd be willing to invest to actually pursue potential yourself. So if you say, well, if it's a $100 million market, I might be willing to invest $5 million myself to capture $100 million worth of value. So that's another way of thinking about what the upfront payment might look like, and how much of a premium would they pay for exclusivity. And this may be less or greater than that of the potentially lost sales as well. So just think through those things, and these sort of guideposts to help you form up your own mind about what an upfront payment might look like. And don't be afraid to ask for an upfront payment either, right? This is they've all got they've seen this before, and they will try this on. And what other costs would you need to provide for? So in terms of maintenance and support. So what I'm saying is, you want to develop a good relationship, but also you want to make sure that you're not giving up something, that you're not leaving something on the table, and then it'll become an area which will then breed distrust and eventually lead to the breakdown of that particular relationship anyway. So having it to start with is not a bad thing. Here I've just sort of mapped out, I've got two maps here to sort of how you go thinking about this, and what I'm showing here is that when you're thinking about the licensing model, and I'll talk about the joint venture, is that you need to map out exactly who is getting what, who is being paid what, and whose costs are being attributed to who in the whole value chain of that licensing deal. So the company that you're dealing with may be the manufacturer. So just is this example is showing them as the manufacturer. You're providing to them a license to be able to manufacture that, and then there is permitted costs that you're allowed to claim, and that might be sales and marketing. It could be all sorts of things, and then based on what they achieve, there might be some upfront payment or milestones based into that license agreement to ensure that they've got incentive and you've got incentive to stay together. And then that company may then also be selling that to distributors. And if the same company is doing the distributors, is the distributor, then you need to be very careful about where those costs are allocated. Because what you can invariably happen is their permitted costs become greater than the revenue that they're generating, and you earn nothing in the deal. So by mapping this out, and where the distributor is in this, and then the reseller, and then the customer, and then where the money actually flows through in this arrangement, is really important for you to understand. And this comes back to the sort of the unit economics, and having this discussion and mapping it out and laying it out with your license partner ensures that everything is transparent and you're understanding where the money is going. Because once you've inked the deal, it's very hard to unink it when the money's involved, and you may end up having a loss leading, and you may not be generating the money that you're wanting to achieve. And so just mapping this out in some ways is an important exercise to understand how does the product get into the customer's hands, and who is being paid what, and what costs are being attributed to those different transactions. Another one that I guess I'm seeing a lot more of recently, particularly in Asia, is joint ventures, and particularly companies in Europe wanting to enter into joint venture agreements with large sort of large companies in Indonesia and Singapore. And so again, a joint venture is a coming together of two companies to form a new company with a certain purpose, and that purpose is to sell and market, or it could be to a particular new product. And the same exercise is really important for you to do in this joint venture exercise, is to understand where the money goes. And so when a joint venture is set up, it's capitalized. So both companies put in, say, $1 million each, or it might be pro-rated on the ownership. And so one key consideration is who controls the JV. And what will normally be the ask by the larger entity is for them to own and have control of that JV. And that means there's certain rights that you are foregoing in that arrangement, which means that you no longer have control of the JV, and they can change things without asking you. So understanding what that looks like, again, there is the supply of goods. It might be a license agreement with the joint venture. But if the joint venture is also the distributor, you need to just watch and understand how that money flows through from the JV back into the customer and then back to the JV and distributed to you. And so again, mapping this out and the way that might look helps you then frame up, and you've got a framework then to have this discussion about what that might look like. And then it gives you an idea of how to put together a term sheet for both businesses. I see, Simon, you've got a question, mate.
Yeah, it was just related to this joint venture side of things, because my understanding is this is the only way to enter the Chinese market effectively. Is that right? Did you know anything about that? Or
yeah, so I've looked at in China quite a few years ago, had a business where we were looking at doing a joint venture. It would be owned by a Chinese citizen. There was a license agreement also attached to that. That was quite some time ago. I would sort of get some more recent advice, but I think it's still right that you can't have a wholly owned subsidiary in China.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay. So one sort of final note about this sort of building out your internationalization plan and thinking about the different routes to market is this, you know, there's always going to be some cultural differences. While English might be a common language between two countries, there's always different cultural differences, and we even notice it between Australia and New Zealand, right? And that comes to business and the way things are done. And so this is, I guess, a map of, you know, how people might engage in discussions, and what it means is that while, you know, silence doesn't always mean that they're happy or compliant with what might have been discussed, and may need some time. So taking some time to develop the relationship and thinking about how people may express it or not express it, or if there's any ambiguity or uncertainty, it just takes time, and you may not be able to confront them straight away to sort of find out what it is, but certainly spending time on the ground in Asian countries with the people you're dealing with is a very useful use of time, and it's a very fruitful way of achieving the best outcome. All right. Before I go through the example, I might just stop there again, and just in case there's any questions. Nope. Awesome. Okay. So this is an example of something that of a company. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of Prospera, but they're, you know, on the face of it, this is how you do it, right? And it's a very good example of the way to be successful with a very deliberate go-to-market. And this company was successfully exited, and with a very low amount of input capital to achieve that exit. So I think it was great for investors, but also for farmers. And so they used the power of AI to make agriculture more predictable, and certainly, you know, probably one of the first companies to do that back in 2014, given where things are today. And then they had a view of where this could go, but what they did first was to use greenhouse as the launch segment, because it was controlled, it was more controlled than an open field, and this is where they could then demonstrate the flagship benefits of their technology in a controlled environment so that they could attract the right partner to take them to the next step. So they proved that it worked in that environment before going to, say, pivot irrigation. And then later on, they partnered with Valley, which had 250,000 center pivots in operation, and were able to get a large scale up with that partnership model. And so this is an example of a good partnership that worked well. So Daniel Koppel was the CEO of the business, and he said, as we got validation on the tech side and traction on the business side, that's when we raised more capital and hired a larger team. Once we were more confident, we said, let's target the bigger challenge of open fields. And so this is something I think that's really important for you, and you're thinking of how this might work in terms of your own scale up into Asia, is just thinking about what is it that you need to demonstrate on the product side and the commercial side before you sort of start raising more capital to then really expand. Because you can fall into the trap of like milk runners, you know, raise too much capital to start with, and then it just burns and you've proven nothing. And so I think this is a really important point, and something that, you know, it's the old adage of crawl, walk, and run. So what they said in terms of their own go-to-market was that they realized they weren't going to be able to build their own brand in agriculture, because agriculture is very traditional, right? And certainly at Zenio, where I am today, that's not our purpose either. We do not want to raise capital to build out a distribution network across the world to sell our product. That's already entrenched. Farming is very relationship driven, and to be able to disrupt that and go direct is a lot of money, and it's not necessarily very successful. So they went with an OEM style as opposed to going direct. And so they were very clear about that. And so that meant that they could work with the right partner. And as they grew that business, their relationship with Valmont, which was their distribution partner, and manufacturing strengthened. And so that was their path, instead of going towards an IPO or trying to go directly with the farmer. And so they kept their independence. And then eventually Valmont saw the value in this and purchased the business. And so they raised a total of 22 million in funding over 3 rounds. And so from that 2014 to 2019, and then they were able to use Valmont as a route to the market. So this is their distribution partner who was able to get the scale and sell it. And then with that, they were able to then go into the adjacent markets that they were trying to chase. And so this sort of ties back to what I was saying earlier about they proved it in one particular market, which wasn't their original market, right? It's in the greenhouse, and they proved it there. And then they went into their adjacent market, which was outdoor crop irrigated markets. And they did that with their partner. And that gave them the strength and financial strength to be able to do that. And then they were acquired in 2019 for $300 million. And so I think this is a really good example, and one I think, you know, I'd encourage you all to sort of read and have a look on the web and read about it, because there's a lot of important lessons in that, which are applicable to what you are trying to do today. All right. So this is just a check-in now, and it'd be good to hear from some of those that we haven't heard from so far about, you know, after talking about all of this for the last sort of hour, you know, where are your biggest sort of question marks now in your business, and what do you need to work on, and do you have any sort of questions about what we've covered so far?
Justin, can we call on you? Can you share?
Yeah, I can do. I was going to let somebody else have a go, but the big, I guess, yeah, going back to that basic model I described about trying to launch in Asia with small holdings, I think the biggest questions to me, partly from this, but partly from other stuff, is that the right model? We've gone for rice because rice is an easier win from a technology point of view, but actually, should we go for a different crop that is in a more developed market that would be easier for us potentially, but more importantly, has much bigger holdings, so the risk for the grower is a lot less. Yeah, and there was one that, the one that came out of this presentation was, should we go for hydroponics or something first on the controlled environment logic and more controls in place? The arguments against that are it's almost too controlled for, and albeit our sort of customer proposition is a price saving. You know, what we're ultimately about is the environmental win from fertilizer. Or hydroponics doesn't have much of an environmental footprint anyway in comparison. But yeah, I think, you know, if my primary option is rice in Asia, I'm kind of also thinking, is a small holding type approach too difficult? Should we give something bigger? And or, you know, Jason's point, the controlled environment approach, would that be a better stepping stone?
Does anyone have thoughts about that?
I just give a couple of thoughts, because we've seen a lot of people introduce products, especially new seed varieties in India. And the way it works in India is certainly the big seed companies, they will go to a village, find a progressive farmer, and they will give that farmer the input, right? Give him it for free, he or she, but and then that progressive farmer will do the demonstration trial side by side. They might do a small plot area or a larger plot, and that sort of side by side trial thing. Other farmers will come to the field once a month to see how it's progressing, and that's how they sort of get the thing over there for seed variety. And you could look at a treated seed being a bit like another seed variety in a way, right? I think there is a question of, with a biofertilizer, do you have to add some supplemental other fertilizer as well? You're never quite sure how it's going to perform in those conditions. And what one thing that worries me a bit on rice is, there's a lot of these alternate wet dry. You dry it out, you fill it with water, you dry it out. People are trying to get to that to reduce methane, but it also says that the conditions are not necessarily stable. And if your biological is within the plant system, maybe that's not a big deal. But if it's in the soil or the water, then I would think it might end up flushing it out, maybe, or there could be other issues. But there are a number of big crops. I think that there are channel partners you can look at for smallholder systems. A lot of NGOs have farmer projects. So if we did a project with Solidaridad, and they were working with I can't remember, about 10,000 soya farmers in MP state. So you can get scale that way through different channel partners as well. I'll
Yeah.
stop there so I don't end up talking too much again.
Well, I think
So we are. You pointed about the water's relevant, but the bacteria will colonize the plant itself. So the ongoing irrigation and the kind of methane bit's less relevant. The channel partner, we actually got approached by the Aga Khan Foundation in Africa. When that was their logic, exactly. It's almost like, yeah, we're trying to solve a vaguely similar problem, and we've got a massive network already, which was just another variable to introduce about Africa instead of Asia.
Well, they are very big in India as well. Yeah.
I think Justin, I think the answer to this is partly sort of the next sort of topic, which is really understanding the market segmentation, the customer or farmer profiles, and what those things are worth, and what their behaviors are, and then making some sort of choice about what that segment is that you go after. And I think that, you know, I'd be doing some work in that space to really sort of, because if you're dealing with small landholders that may not have the financial capacity or the risk, that sounds like they're not the right ones that you need to be dealing with. And so thinking about what the actual market looks like, not what sort of, I guess, what you might think is the best one to go for.
Just one other thought. The organic markets are very used to using biologicals as well. And again, there are a bunch of organic NGOs all over, which could be really ready-made channels for that type of product as well.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Well, this is sort of about the market stuff now. So I'm a big believer in this, and it's very powerful, and I've used it many times to correct businesses, and to even as Zenio, we've gone through this process ourselves. And so market segmentation is critical. You need to do that to really understand who the market is, and who the customers are, and the customer profiles inside that. Then you can make a strategic choice about who you're going to target and how to position that to be successful in your sales. So this is an example of what we did at Zenio, right? And this is what I mean by market segmentation. This is the whole market. This is about the market. It's not about us. It's not about what we think or whatever. This is the market. And this is what weed killing market looks like in Australia. And so the way in which we sort of dissected it is that you've got the different applications, which is pasture and turf, vegetables, orchards and vineyards, and broadacre. And then you've got farm type, organic and conventional. And for each of these market segments, we did the work to understand how many farmers, so we gave them a name to describe their behavior. So for example, organic warriors. There's 1,800 farms in Australia that are organic farmers for vegetables. Today they pay about $7,500 per hectare to weed their farm. And what does their sort of pre-crop and in-crop activities look like? And so we did this for each of the particular market segments. And so it told us how many farms are there, how much are they paying now for the substitute product that we were wanting to displace, and what is their sort of behavior. And then what is important then for each of them, and this is an example of a different product, but we wrote who their profile is. So what's their profile? What are the high value features that they value? What are the current solutions that they are using? And what value do they gain from using our solution, right? And so these customer profiles are so important to do to be successful in your internationalization, because what it means is that when you meet a farmer or meet a customer or meet whoever it is that is is that you're talking to, you can then put them into one of these segments and say, okay, that is an organic warrior. He's not or she's not in our particular market right now. It doesn't say we're saying no, but it's something that we'll come back to later. But then you might talk to someone who they're organic minimalists, and they're the ones that are in our target market. They're the ones that we want. And you start getting a profile and being able to profile those farmers and being able to understand who they are and putting them into those buckets, which allows you then, in terms of your sales and marketing efforts, is to really target those particular farmers. What that does then is that you can then communicate the problem better than your competitor. And that's how you'll win, is because they've got a problem they want fixed. And if you understand that market segment very well, then you're able to do that. An important part of that, though, is it is just not the feature or the product benefit that they're getting, is that there's some sort of customer benefit and emotional benefit. And if you can think about what are those things, then that is a good way in which you can go about positioning your particular product in the market. And that might be peace of mind, might be emotional benefit. It might be the feeling of financial security. It could be something that's intangible, but it is an emotional benefit for that farmer. And so understanding what those things are for your product is something to give some consideration. The other is, I might, just given time, I'm going to go down here today. And I think, Prayesh, it's a good time to introduce you. I'm sure the rest of your...
We've got a bit of a problem. Unfortunately, Priyesh is in an area with very poor internet connectivity, so he won't be able to join us today. But I was wondering if we could, do a little bit of sharing from somebody else. I think putting somebody on the spot a little bit, but Justin, do you reckon you'd like to introduce yourself, introduce what you do very quickly, and as a sort of 1 minute on your strategy on go-to-market? And I think Jason and everyone else can help work through that.
If you want to let somebody else go, I've kind of contributed, don't want to dominate things. I've said quite a lot on this call.
Sure, yeah. If there's any other takers, that'd be really great for Jason to just hear out how you've been approaching your go-to-market strategy. I think we heard some interesting cases from like Alina or even like Trudy Bash. So if any of you would like to share as well, that'll be really, really exciting for Jason. How about Trudy Bash then?
I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Just give me a second to open my...
Okay.
Just give me a second.
Just while you're doing that, did everyone read the Zespri case study?
Yeah.
Show of hands.
Okay.
Madeline, can you allow me to share the screen, please?
Okay.
So just a quick share, actually, based on sort of your go-to-market strategy and your plans on that.
Arinav, are you able to? Oh, thank you.
Just quickly, maybe give a 10-second particular elaboration. So we basically are a B2B platform to enable farm and food sector for making the value chain sustainable and convert them into nature-based carbon offset projects. So the platform offers farm level decision support, supply chain sustainability, farm to table traceability, and all such data points get amalgamated as a carbon offset management dashboard. So let me just quickly go to the market page. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is a B2B platform. So we are looking at two baskets. One is purely the business and traceability part of it, where the platform is offered to farm input and procurement companies, food product and retail companies, and also farm lenders and insurers. We have got one or two clients in each of these segments right now who are using the platform. And the second basket is farm decision support and tracking, where we are working with government agencies, farm level aggregators, and plantation and contract farming companies. Similarly, we have got clients in each of these baskets. Farm aggregator basket is stronger in terms of numbers because there are about 35 such cooperatives and farmer groups that we are working with in India and Kenya at this point of time, as some discussions are happening about this smallholder farmers in India and how to access them and how to bring them as a part of the process. So in India, these farmer producer companies are emerging as those convenient aggregation points for enterprises like ours to engage with as a more viable node of engaging with the smallholder farmers. And these projects, which are on the right side of it, if some of those can migrate into nature-based carbon projects where there is carbon sequestration happening, either through organic or even the regenerative farming or through forestry. So in terms of our effort to internationalize in the ASEAN segment, we currently have some footprints in Philippines. We have got an agreement with the Development Bank of Philippines, which is in place. We are expecting to start a project in next 2 months with the government of Philippines through Development Bank of Philippines, who is our front-ending licensing partner there, to build a digital registry of farmers and fishermen in Mindanao region of Philippines. We are also working means in discussion with the Coconut Board of Philippines as the cooperative aggregator to have a digital integration of individual coconut farmers and converting into carbon offset projects. So yeah, so as far as ASEAN is concerned, that's our existing footprint. We are in talks with a potential partner in Malaysia. Talks have progressed, but we have not closed that as yet. So just wanted to share this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tridivesh.
Fantastic.
I think my feedback on that is that I think you're doing too much. You need to focus on one of those market segments and really define your customer value proposition for one of them. Otherwise, you'll be spreading yourself very thin and won't be successful at any of them. So, that's just my view of your go-to-market.
Thanks, Tridivesh, for sharing so impromptu. And know that you can feel free to just arrange a session with Jason after this as well, if anyone's interested. So back to you, Jason.
Yeah, all right, thank you. So look, I'm going to talk about pricing, and the other material I'll share with you. But I think this is quite important. One thing that I think, and maybe the guys at Grow will be working with you on, is your unit economics and understanding what that looks like, because this drives your business, and understanding what the input costs are, what revenue you're generating, tells you what profit you're able to make and what that might look like over time. And so the unit economics is a really important calculation for you to do, because it tells you how you can scale your business. It allows you to evaluate new market segments, what those growth opportunities might look like. It also allows you to forecast and understand where any oncoming failure might come from, because your unit economics will be dependent upon suppliers, it could be dependent on people, it could be dependent on all sorts of things. It allows you to understand where that is, but also what you need to do to get to break even. And that's an question your investors will be asking is, okay, well, I'll give you $3 million, but when are you going to break even and start generating revenue? And so that is something that's so important in unit economics. And part of that is your customer acquisition cost. So in terms of sort of software as a service systems, this is sort of benchmarked in terms of what it costs to acquire customers. And so in ag tech software as a service, it's sort of at a business that is running, it's about $700 to acquire a customer. So you can understand where you need to be and what your costs are to operate. So there's
Sorry, which market was that for?
ag tech software as a service.
I mean geography.
Just global average.
Because I can imagine that'd be very different in the US than in India, for example.
Yeah, it's sort of it's US centric table. Simon, yeah. And so the point here is to sort of understand what your customer acquisition costs are and being able to quantify those to help you put together unit economics. And part of that,
I read it the right way now. Okay.
Good. So there's several financial levers that can be used to increase your revenue and reduce costs. Okay, so obviously price, increasing volumes, reducing cost of goods, reducing operational expenses, accounts receivable, making sure people are paying on time, managing your inventory and work in progress, particularly if you're manufacturing, and payment of your accounts. But out of all of those, price is the one that has the greatest impact on profit. And so a 1% increase in price has around about 11% increase on profit. And so out of all of these, price is so important for you to get right and do a lot of work on in the early stages of your business. You can reduce variable costs and increase volumes and sales and fixed costs, and they all add, but it's price that has the largest impact on your profitability. And so it's the most important to get right. Just a bit of a word of warning, and I think this is a trap that everyone sort of wants to go down because they're excited when someone wants it and they want to do them a good deal. But when thinking about doing trials and selling the first product, don't discount. You spend all of this money from your investors, you've built this product, you believe in the value. All it does is ruin your value. It creates uncomfortable conversations later. It sets price expectations in the market. You won't be able to recover easily from this position, and it creates a mess for your sales team later on because farmers all talk to each other. They're on Facebook and everything else, and they will share information. And once you set a price, then it's very hard to walk that back. And so there are other ways in which to do that through rebates, or if you're doing a trial, just pay them to do the trial. And then that is a cleaner way of doing it. So and you don't need to then talk about a discount or what that might look like for the particular trial. So you can either just pay them to do because it's important for you to get the data, and you can talk then about what the price expectation is. And if they don't like it, then they're not the right customer for you. So there's different pricing approaches, and it'll all depend on the type of business and your revenue model that you're looking for. And all of these deserve their own sort of session themselves, but these are sort of the key elements of a pricing approach. Value-based pricing, I'm sure you've all heard about that, but what value a customer will place on this. And so a good example is a Louis Vuitton pair of shoes, for example. So people place a high value that's reduced supply, and so they're able to put value, or it could be a medical device, and so people put more value on that and prepared to pay more. Could be usage-based pricing, so it could be per hectare, it could be per kilo. That might be the way of, that you want to be able to monetize your own product. You can constantly iterate it, so particularly if you're offering software as a service, and so you can sort of test it as you're offering the service, and then looking at whether people are prepared to pay more or pay less for different services. There's the Goldilocks principle, which is sort of offering different price points and anchoring, and people choosing based on what their perceived value or what they're losing by not having that product. Land and expand means that you can offer a certain product and then offer more value above that to start increasing the amount of revenue that you're getting per customer. The other important thing is pricing delivery and how you think about setting the price and what that might look like. And so the psychological value of the number is important, and the way you frame the price is just as important as what the price actually is. And so some consideration needs to be given to that. The endowment effect, some of you may experience that with, here's a car, here's it's $25,000, drive it home for the weekend, try it, and then that sense of loss by having to give it back and people placing more value on it when they don't have something after experiencing it is the endowment effect. And then other ways might be incentivizing upfront payments and longer term contracts. But I want to get into how you go about maybe working out what the price is for your particular product. So there's different ways of doing this, and there's two ways in which I'll describe to you tonight, which is around the willingness to pay and the Van Wessendorp approach. There's qualitative methods to do this, and working out what competitors' price is, talking to customers and trying to triangulate a particular price. Survey pricing and willingness to pay experimentation, so how you might ask that question. I'll talk about that on the next slide. The Van Wessendorp pricing, and I'll show you an example of how that works. Conjoint, which is, you're testing one price against another with two groups of customers, and that allows you to then work out where that pricing, the optimal pricing is. And experimentation, which is really just trying different prices with a large number of groups, and that's typically with sort of software as a service type of pricing models. One thing to note though is that you need to get data, right, to do this, and you should be collecting this data from your farmers to be able to get statistical significance. And so if your population size of farmers is 5,000 and you want to have a 95% confidence and a margin of error of 5%, it means you really need to talk to 357 farmers, right? So you can do that face-to-face, you might do it focus groups, you might contract someone to do that, or you might just send them a survey to do it, right? So, but you really need to get a reasonable number to get some confidence in the data that you're generating. So the first one is the willingness to pay. So how do you sort of start working out what you need to ask when talking to someone about your product? And so if they're familiar with the product, it might be a replacement product or something very familiar to them, you can ask two questions. One is, how much would you be willing to pay for this product or service, and leave it open-ended? Or how much would you be willing to pay for this product, and provide some example responses and allow them to choose. Now, by having a large number, statistically significant, that allows you to then work out where that number is. If it's something new and they're not necessarily familiar with that product, so it might be something that is a new product to do something new on the farm, then there's a different way of framing that question. And so how much would you expect to pay for this product and service, and leave it open-ended? Or how much would you expect to pay, and provide sort of 4 to 6 answer options? And again, getting the statistical significance is really important. And these conversations are usually first best done in person or on a call, to sort of gauge where people are going. And then as you do that, you'll get better at asking these questions. The next one.
I just wonder how you avoid getting the answer nothing a lot, because especially in sort of digital space, I expect to pay nothing these days.
Yeah. So what you can do is then, okay, well, for that you expect to pay nothing, and then if you could also do these things, how much would you be willing to pay above that? And so if you're doing a software, a SaaS type of product, you have to think about how you want to frame it first, right? So the first one might be, this is included, and then these things are optional. And so how much would you pay for these optional things? And so you need to sort of think about that. And so talking to, say, 10 or 20 farmers or customers to start with helps you sort of gauge where people might be thinking, and then allows you to then sort of frame up how you might want to go about this. And so these are just two sort of simple approaches to start with, Simon, but I'm happy to have a call with you separately to sort of talk more specific about what you might be looking
Great,
for.
thanks.
The other is the Van Wessendorp, and this is ideal for products or service with existing substitutes. So maybe food, or even a software as a service, or it might be a new electric fencing product. People are already familiar with what the product might be doing, and so there's 4 questions that you can ask them, and I use this, and I'll show you an example of how to use this. So the first one is, the question framing is, at what price would you consider this to be so expensive that you wouldn't not consider buying it? So this is sort of the upper limit. And then what price would you consider to be priced so low that you feel the quality wouldn't be very good? And then what price do you think it's starting to get expensive, right? And these are all open-ended questions where people will give you a number. And then what price would you consider it to be a bargain? Now, you can do this exercise to frame it up with only 3 questions, and that will give you reliable data. 2 will sort of, the confidence starts dropping off, and 1 is if you were going to ask any one of these questions, you didn't want to ask all 4 questions, is at what price would it start getting expensive, would be the only question if you only wanted to ask 1. So what happens is that this is an example of the Van Wessendorp and how it works, just to show you the power of what is capable of doing this approach. And so this was a business to consumer product. And so it was sold to resellers that then sold it to customers. And so we asked them those 4 questions. And when you do the processing of that information, you get a graph that looks like this. And so you can see what that does. It triangulates and provides an area of where the optimal pricing is. And so somewhere in here, 50% of people will pay, sort of $1,000 for this particular product. And now the product that we were developing was a premium product. And we felt that, well, at that price, it is below our manufacturing price. And so there's no way in which we're going to make money, right? So what it enabled us to do was, then you've got this create a table which shows you what the price is. And then here is the volume. So as the price increases, the volume decreases. And so you're able to establish that relationship. And then with the factory producing this, that as the price, as the volume goes up, then the price of manufacturing comes down, and so you can factor that into your calculation, and then you can work out what the revenue is for that product at that particular price. And then because of the volume that you can produce, you then factor that in terms of the cost per unit, and then the total cost per unit, and then you're able to draw this graph which shows you what the profit is and your break even. So this is the unit economics now all coming together, right? So what it showed was that really to break even, we had to sell this product for at least $3,000, right? And we saw it as a premium product that we could, that had superior performance of where it could actually be sold. So what we did was to look at the willingness to pay, right? And now for a premium product, we're not interested in selling to everyone. We don't have to sell to everyone. But what what it showed was at $6,000 for RRP, 6% of the population would buy it. But if we charged $9,000, 5% of the population would buy it. So of that particular market. So there's $3,000 extra that we could make by targeting only 5% of the population, which is only a 1% reduction, but we're making $3,000 more. And so what this allowed us to do is to use that unit economics, and then using 9,000 meant that we're getting a gross margin now of 60 to 70% for this particular product. We're able to position this product as a premium product and sell it into the market. And it's being sold at that price today and is successful. And so there is a science, if you like, in the willingness to pay and pricing that you need to think about and do the maths and the modeling to understand where your product can be priced, because this is the one place where you're where you need to provide your attention to ensure that you're pricing this product. And it means talking to a lot of customers, getting the data, looking at the data, and then going back and retesting this, and then testing it with your suppliers, with your customers around that product and the value proposition that comes from the market segmentation and the positioning. And bringing all that together allows you then to put together a very firm product offering.
Is that still based on the Van Weston DORP, and is that based on becoming expensive, or is that a completely separate question?
No, it's all based on this and using some extrapolation of the data, and then going back and testing that with the population. So what I might do is just a couple of more things. One thing that in terms of your internationalization plan is that risks do come true. So I would suggest that you need to manage those risks, look at the risks that you're managing in your internationalization, and think about how do you address those risks. So you may have to spend money to address them. You may need to form alliances. You may need to do something to address those. So know what the gremlins are in your business, know the competition, and actively manage those risks. And then I guess finally, here's some, I think these are great books, worth a read to help you sort of with your internationalization plan and what you might be doing. These are certainly things that I've used and found valuable over my career as well. So I might just stop there, Arnav, and perhaps there might be some questions.